What is going on, GBA fans? My name is Berk, and today we are bringing you week 2 of the Pick'em crew for GBA Season 7. But of course, I am not alone. I am joined by my co-host, Matty Brolick.
What is going on, everybody? You got Matty Brolick here, and I am very glad to be back after a very exciting first week of battles.
Yeah, week 1, as you can see on the screen, I did not do so well. Then again, a lot of us didn't do that very well. A lot of matches that quite a few of us weren't able to pick correctly. It was the first week, so we weren't sure how some coaches were going to use their teams. And so, like you can see, almost all of us got George versus Steve wrong. Almost all of us got Gator versus Envy wrong. And most of us got Tup versus Callum wrong. So hopefully next week will be a little bit better than that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was just from learning from last year, these weeks are very difficult to call. Like, it doesn't matter whether a team starts getting hot or not. It's just really always a toss-up with these coaches and their crazy teams and whatnot. So I'm expecting an exciting season with a lot of surprises.
Yeah, so the first battle of week 2, we have the Philadelphia Scissors versus the Florida Gators. Now, I got the Florida Gators picked, and we are relatively split. Most people picking Philadelphia, but a few of us picking the Gators. The fans picking Philadelphia as well. I picked Gator because, one, I was really impressed with how he played week 1. Granted, he did have a very strong team matchup, but even again this week, he has really good checks to a lot of the Scissors offense. You think Kieran Black, well, he's got things like Latios that can offensively check it, or it can at least revenge kill it. He's got things like Heatran that with berries can take earth powers and then fire back hard at it. So he's got ways of dealing with a lot of the Scissors offense, and if he can effectively, I feel like, use like Latios really well, because Latios also deals with things like Volcanion. It can offensively check the Azumarill, so it's going to be a good battle. They both have really strong offensive matchups against each other, but I feel, just based on how last week Gator used his team, I was really impressed. So I'm going to go with him this week. Hope he wins. But,
yeah, I thought this was a pretty difficult one to call because the matchup looks somewhat split. I do think that Chimpact just having things like Kieran Black, Thunderous Eye, and like Azumarill and Volcanion just makes his offensive matchup pretty good against everybody. But that being said, you're definitely correct when you say that both of them have a lot of huge offensive threats towards one another. Chimpact obviously came off a rough loss week 1, losing to a timer stall. So I would imagine that he's going to be taking some notes on exactly what Gator does to make sure that he comes back this week. And Gator, you're definitely made a great point saying that he used his team really well. Like, I didn't even know Pukumuku got dual screens, so when I saw that, I was like, wow, kudos to Gator. That was awesome. So if he could pull out another thing like that could catch Chimpact off guard, then I definitely think he could pull out the win.
Up next, we've got the Milwaukee Sawsbucks versus the Alola Athletic. Why don't you take this one?
Okay, well, when it comes to pro wrestling, I would probably consider myself a babyface, so I'm automatically opposed to the heel of the league, or at least the heels, because I feel like we have at least a couple of them. So because of that, I'm just going to have to go with the Alola Athletic here, just because I definitely like their team matchup overall. I'm really not a fan of the way Steve's team was put together. Like, yes, it has some big threats, no doubt. It just seems very clunky to me, like very awkward. And if he can make it work, then kudos, because that would be really, really impressive. That would just reflect a lot on the coach, even more than the team itself. His week against George obviously wasn't the cleanest win. A typical way to win is a heel. And because of that, I am going to go with a Hoodlum Scrafty and the Alola Athletic.
I'm going to say I'm not much into wrestling, so I'll just agree with whatever you said there, because I also picked the Alola Athletic. One of the reasons is the sand offense is actually pretty good against Steve.
Yep.
As long as Callum can get rid of Cresselia, if it comes. I'm assuming Cresselia is going to be there, but the only way that Steve really stops the Sand offense is using things like Cresselia and Cofagrigus, which in case you notice, Tyranitar deals with very well. So I feel like Steve's going to have a difficult time with that because like in Rock Day, while it can take advantage of the Sand, it's just, there's just too much on Callum's team that just says absolutely no to it. So I think the matchup's definitely in Callum's favor. I'm going to go with him.
Yep, I definitely agree. That Sand offense is just incredible against Steve, and the fact that his best checks are things like Cofagrigus and especially Cresselia makes it all the more nice for Callum, because then Tyranitar really just has a field day, like you said. So yeah, with that being said, then we have game 3 with the Tampa Bay Luxrays versus the Pittsburgh Piratas.
Yeah, so this game, I am going with Mono. He is my lock, as well as your lock, Rob's lock, and Jarrett's lock. We were very confident in this match. Now, my comment on this was Buzzwole basically destroys his team. Like, let's just be honest. He only has one switch into both stabs, being Chandelure. Now, I know Tapu Koko does resist both stabs, but it's Tapu Koko, not the bulkiest thing in the world. So, just based on that alone, Mono has team matchup. 100%. Then you look at how well Chandelure matches up against Mono's team. Not very well when you consider Zygarde, 50%. You consider Mantine, you consider Greninja, you consider Florges. You consider all the things that can easily take hits or just outright kill it. Just from looking at team matchup, I would say Mono has it. Mono's also just really, really fantastic in league format. And after kind of a shaky win week 1, I think he's going to really want to solidify his place in this league with a week 2 win.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially seeing Zygarde. Oh, he's got Zygarde 50% on his team, Mono, and Tup's best check is Tangrowth, which, yes, could eat up ground moves all day, and even physical dragon moves pretty well, but Zygarde is so bulky that it could run some really interesting setup type sets that can even eat up Tangrowth, like Hidden Power Ices, for example, if it really wants to, and it could get off a Toxic on it. And with that type of wearing down of Tangrowth, then nothing on his team could switch into 1,000 Arrows very safely, especially with a boost or two. So Zygarde looks like a huge annoyance to his team. Should be interesting to see if he brings it. Mono's team is definitely growing on me as well, as he actually has Salazzle, which is a Pokemon that I've been using in the National Pokeball League lately and really, really liking, because the ability to poison anything is really clutch. It is just so cool because it could allow other Pokemon on your team that may struggle to get past something really put in extra work because their main check is poison. So that, plus the fact that it also has just really powerful dual stabs, is nice, but there are things on Tup's team that could totally shut it down, like Blissey, even Slowking potentially. So yeah, overall I think Mono has the team matchup. Mono's a fantastic player. I know last week he made a mistake with his Greninja Eevee, so we know that he won't be making any more Eevee mistakes in the coming weeks, so that is something that will only help him. That's why I feel like he's going to get the win over Tup.
So yeah, up next we got the San Francisco Arcanauts versus the Borussia Donphan. Borussia, I'm still never going to pronounce it correctly, but we got George versus Lars. Why don't you talk about this one?
George obviously had a very difficult loss last week. Like I said, it was not the cleanest by any means, with a good amount of hacks that really cost him the end game there. George is, far and away one of the most established draft league players out there. It's hard to keep him down multiple weeks in a row. I don't really like anybody's matchup against Lars this season, though, because his team is just so ridiculously powerful that unless you just have a team that's so geared towards offense, then it's just always going to be difficult considering how much power he has. He can pretty much plow through any team. That being said, his team is just so offensive, and if George could capitalize on all that frailty and whatnot, like the good player and builder that he is, I think he'll definitely come out with the win this week, because George is George. He's just, like I said, very, very well-rounded draft league player. It's just coming off such a rough loss last week that I think he'll probably pull it through. And, George's, like I said, George's team can't really take hits from all of Lars's huge threats, but he does have some major offensive threats to Borussia Donphan, namely things like Garchomp looks really scary. I guess Raikou does look really good if he could just weaken the Donphan. Then obviously Mew has a set in its arsenal that's good against every single team. So yeah, it should be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, same with you look at Superior as well. If you have a set like Leaf Storm, Dragon Pulse, Hidden Power Fire, hits pretty much the entirety of the team for neutral and can put in a lot of work as well. So, it's just a lot of threats on his team. And I picked George also. It's George. He's not going 0-2. It's just not happening. It's just not happening. I don't think George has ever gone 0-2 in any league he's been in. So I don't see it happening. That's pretty much why I picked him.
Yep.
It's just not happening. I'm sorry, Lars, but George isn't going 0-2. So up next, we have the San Jose Sharpedos versus the Utah Jasmine, and I picked the San Jose Sharpedos again. I was let down last week, but I've been building with Tom this week, and most people believe in the Utah Jasmine, and it's very understandable. Cooper came off a fairly decisive win. I know it was timer stalling. People aren't quite keen on that strategy, but it did work for him, and he was able to pull out a basically 0-0 victory. I'm picking Tom again because, one, I want to believe he's going to win, and two, I just feel like this is going to be with a lot of Cooper's matchups when he's faced with a much more offensive team. Cooper has a much bulkier, slower team. Tom has a he's got a lot of faster threats, and you just look at one threat in particular, Thunder's Therian, and that just absolutely runs through pretty much the entirety of Cooper's team. You set up one nasty plot, you outspeed everything aside from Swallow, and you can pretty much two-shot everything with the right moveset. So Thunderous T, huge threat. But even on Cooper's side, you look at some of his offensive threats. Darmanitan, very powerful, very hard-hitting wall breaker, and Tom's only decent defensive check, kinda, is Vaporeon, and it's not a defensive check if it's like a banded Darmanitan. So Cooper does have his offensive threats, but I think Tom, if he utilizes Thunderous Therian well, can definitely pull out the win, and so I'm picking him this week.
Yeah, I 110% agree. Looking at this matchup more closely, it's almost making me want to change my pick here because Tom's team just looks like it matches up quite well against Cooper's, but just going off of historically watching them battle, it's not that Cooper's not making mistakes, because I definitely have seen him not play his best, but he's just so tricky. I've seen Tom get caught off guard before, lose to maybe things he wouldn't expect to lose to, or anyone would expect him to lose to. So with that being said, also Cooper coming off a big win over someone like Chimpact, I figured maybe he'd have a good shot here, especially because he's got Comfy on his roster. You never know when Comfy's going to turn around and sweep you. I don't care if Tom has a Celesteela. If he thinks that Celesteela is the counter, then he doesn't really know Comfy. So because of that, I just went with Cooper here, but I totally think Tom could take it to Cooper because his team matchup is really nice.
I mean, does anyone really have a good matchup against Comfy?
Absolutely not.
No, it's the destroyer of teams. And as soon as he brings it, he's probably gonna 6-0 the first person he brings it against.
Exactly.
We have the Detroit Steel Wings versus the San Francisco Giants up next, so you can take this one.
Okay, so this one I just went with the San Francisco Giants. Looking at the matchup back and forth, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. I figured that it could be a solid one, just a solid game all around, because I do like Gio's team. It's really well-rounded, but so is the Steel Wings team, and I just figured that overall it could be a really good back and forth type of game. I don't know Crimson as well, and from watching him in, I think, season 5 it was, I wasn't as impressed as I was with Gio in these last couple seasons, so that is one of the reasons I'm going with Gio. But I definitely think that this match can kind of go either way, because they both have pretty solid teams, and they both seem to have answers for most of each other's mons and whatnot.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting battle. You look at Crimson's team, I feel like he's going to have a little bit of a difficult time dealing with Tapu Fini.
Yep.
Just because Tapu Fini, deals decently well. I mean, Crimson doesn't have a Magneton. He also has a Skuntank, so that can definitely help. But at the same time, I feel like Gio can deal with it. I mean, the big problem, I just look at Gio's team, and I think I mentioned this last week, is he's got just this crazy electric weakness to the team. And the only things that resist it is Ferrothorn and Heliolisk. Now, Heliolisk is not an electric resist because it's frail, and Ferrothorn's not a good electric resist this week because it's against a Magneton, and you don't switch in Ferrothorn in on a Magneton because you're going to get trapped. I mean, obviously you can run like Octoberry Bulldoze, and you can try to plan around it, but still not fantastic. So Crimson definitely has a really good shot. I can definitely see Specs or a Scarf Magneton coming and just kind of punching holes in a lot of Geo's team. And if he can't control that, then I feel like Crimson will have a really good shot at winning this battle. So I'm gonna go with Geo. I'm kind of hesitant.
I just realized right now that Geo doesn't have a ground type like you mentioned, and for anyone who's watching and listening and plans on drafting anytime soon, an electric immunity is something you need on pretty much every team, because fast electric types like Jolteon, Raikou, mainly things like Thundurus, the Tapu Koko, that are really powerful and can constantly come in with their high speed and power. You really don't want to give those things the chance to just constantly volt switch around, because they'll do a lot of damage if you're forced to switch out. And even if you switch into something that resists electric, they can either pack coverage for those things or just get a really good amount of damage and get the momentum and switch initiative into something that deals with whatever you sent them to take the volt switch. So,
but I will give this one to Geo, just because he is a very crafty player. And he's come up with some very interesting sets in the past, whereas Crimson, I haven't seen him do anything really crazy. I feel like Geo might be able to catch him off guard with something. So up next, we've got the New Orleans Pelipers versus the San Diego Chimchargers. I went with San Diego Chimchargers in MV. The reason I went with MV, and even though I look at the team matchup and I say John has a pretty good matchup, because you look at MV's team and what honestly wants to deal with Tapu Bulu, and you just say, oh, nothing, because it can pack coverage for basically anything.
Yep.
And I don't care if that's a land or a T. It can be fully physically. You can give it 512 EVs in both HP and defense with Intimidate and Rocky Helmet, and it's still not dealing with Tapu Bulu. So he doesn't really have anything that wants to take that on. And if John can utilize Tapu Bulu well, it's definitely going to be difficult for Envy. As always in the past, John is a relatively safe planner, and Envy is not a safe planner. He likes to come up with anything that he can. Even like last week, bringing Scarf Pelipper, which caught Gator off guard. He knows how big of a problem Tapu Bulu is going to be for his team, especially for a rain team. He's not going to let it beat him. And I don't think Envy's going to be one of the guys that's going to go 0-2 after the first 2 weeks, and so I picked Envy.
Yeah, no, I kind of went with the same approach there, because John definitely has some major threats to Envy's team, but the Infernape is definitely neutered a little bit by the rain if he does bring it. But yeah, the Tapu Bulu has no switch-ins. Obviously, Dragonite can get hit pretty hard by things like Stone Edge or even a Dazzling Gleam. Unfortunately, Tapu Bulu does not get player off. Overall, John being the safe planner that you just spoke about is something that I think could really backfire here, because normally that's not a bad thing. You want to plan for what makes sense, because you're going to give your opponent the respect of doing things that make sense, and then you're going to build accordingly. MV is definitely not the type of builder that brings things that necessarily make sense. There is a method to his madness, 100% no doubt, but he will bring things just for the sake of them being really, really heat, and things that could catch his opponent off guard regardless of whether they have the best matchup or not. With that being said, if MV really pulls out the heat on John, then he could easily come out with the win here, because he's just got a very offensive team. John does have some huge threats to MV's team, but it's not like he could switch into things like Dragonite. He's got the Magnezone for the Skarmory. He's got an Alakazam that hits most of John's team really hard. And yeah, with the rain offense, that is also quite the threat to the Pelipers. So that being said, I definitely think MV, if he brings enough heat and can catch John off guard the way that I think he can, because John does plan safely, I would expect MV to get the win.
And we've got our last battle. We have the Free State Torcats versus the St. Louis Rampardos. So you can take the last battle.
Okay, for the last one here, I went with the Free State Torcats here. I was looking at the St. Louis Rampardos team, and I was just like, okay, well, where is the Weavile switching? I mean, I know that like Steelix is really bulky, and it could probably take something like a knockoff plus a low kick, but it's still taking a ton of damage from low kick. If you keep setting in Steelix to take damage, then eventually Weavile will be able to knock it out. Eventually, Toxapex obviously is an okay one, in the sense that it can easily take a knockoff or two. If the Weavile gets up to like +2 or something like that, and the Toxapex switches in, it's going to take a huge chunk from knockoff. He also has a lot that could pressure the Toxapex, like he has the Landorus Eye. He has Keldeo that can kind of set up on it, because even though Toxapex gets Haze, Keldeo also gets Taunt, so it could really kind of shut it down with like a Calm Mind type set. It's got the Celebi. Yeah, overall, I do like Duncan's team. He has a lot of solid, bulky offense. The Metagross looks like another very, very big threat, something that's difficult to switch into for the Rampardos. But obviously Dan has some really big, powerful wall breakers like Victini and Terrakion that can certainly do a number to Duncan's team, so should be interesting. But I definitely like Duncan's matchup a little bit more here. But we haven't seen him play enough to really know, how great of a builder he is and how great of a player he is yet. So it's definitely up in the air. Dan can definitely, surprise people because he's definitely the best at that. He's definitely the best at surprising people. So I could see this one being a really good game that could go either way. But I just decided to pick the Free State Torcats here.
See, I looked at the team and I said, he has Weavile switch-ins. He has to find Landorus switch-ins.
Right.
Because obviously it's a little bit weaker without the sheer force, but it's still Landorus high, still base 125 special attack with a fantastic move pool. And I feel like if Dan can find a good Landorus switch-in, he shouldn't have too much of a problem with Weavile. Because while Weavile, yes, if it gets up to +2, that is a problem. Not even gonna lie, Weavile is very strong, but with a combination of Toxapex and then good offensive checks to it, like a Scarf Victini, like a Scarf Terrakion, it shouldn't be too much of a problem, especially if he gets rocks up. So I look at the team matchup, and then I also look at Victini, and I say, how does Duncan deal with Victini? Because Alola Marowak's is not a really good check to it. Weavile pretty much dies. Keldeo can't take a Psychic move, obviously. You just go down the list. Victini really picks apart the team if Dan can use it well, and Dan has a lot of experience with Victini, so I'm sure he's going to be able to use it well.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw it in the other manner, that Dan has a lot of offensive threats that he can use against Duncan, as well as a really strong defensive core to take on Weavile, take on Landorus, take on Marowak, that I feel like if Dan is able to plan, effectively, and I know that's an if he plans better, but I feel like Dan can take the win this week.
Yeah, definitely.
So that is going to wrap up the Week 2 Pick'em crew. As always, please leave your own picks in the comment section below with your locks, and explain why you decided to lock a certain team, because this season I can guarantee it ain't going to be easy locking for someone, because Week 1 we already saw that it's going to be hard to pick, and I can tell you this week just as hard to pick for the first week, if not maybe a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember from doing this last year, it didn't get any easier. I was surprised the first week to see how many I got wrong. Just when I thought I was starting to get in a little bit of a groove, I would get really surprised in the coming weeks. So definitely keep being a part of the Pick'em crew and leaving your picks and everything. Anyway, hope you guys continue to just be a part of this series, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as we enjoyed making it, and I just hope you're prepared for more and more exciting weeks. So with that being said, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again next week.
Bye.